Family, let me tell you something. Fear ain't always about guns, wars, or power. Sometimes fear comes from respect. Sometimes it comes from potential. And sometimes it comes from a nation that's been overlooked for too long but is finally rising into its destiny. That's why America fears India, because there's a giant that has been quiet for years, and now it's waking up. The power of numbers. You ever notice how people underestimate numbers until those numbers start working together? One bee don't scare nobody, but a swarm will make the strongest man run. That's the story of India. For years, the world looked at its billion people as just numbers, but when those billion people start to focus, that's when fear creeps in. Numbers represent potential. Every single child born in India ain't just a child. It's a dream, it's a future leader, it's a possibility that could change the whole world. You can't ignore that. America sees it. That's why they're nervous. Think about it. 4 billion people means 4 billion voices. You can't silence that. You can't control that. And once those voices start speaking in unison, it becomes a sound so loud it shakes the world. Numbers create leverage. Imagine you run a business. If you got the most customers, you control the market. That's how India is. When you have the most people, you control demand, you control labor, you control culture. That's not weakness, that's dominance. Some folks thought population was a problem. They called it poverty, they called it chaos, but they missed the truth. The truth is numbers are power when you know how to use them. And India is learning how to use them. America is used to being the biggest voice in the room. But when they look at India, they see something different. A crowd so massive that even if only half of them spoke, it would still drown out the noise of the West. That's power. A billion people mean a billion solutions. You think about innovation, invention, creativity. It don't come from the top, it comes from the masses. And when you got more masses than anybody else, you're sitting on an endless well of ideas. You see, numbers represent energy, and energy, when directed, becomes unstoppable. That's why America fears India. It ain't about what's already been done. It's about what can be done when a billion hearts and minds start moving in the same direction. Numbers also mean resilience. If one falls, another rises. If one fails, another tries again. You can't defeat a nation with so much backup. You knock down one dreamer, 10 more show up. That's scary to anybody who wants to stay in control. Look at history. Nations rise not because they have a handful of powerful leaders, but because they have an army of everyday people willing to stand up. India has the biggest army of them all, its people. And don't get it twisted. These numbers ain't just statistics. These are men, women, children who carry pride, culture, and vision inside of them. That combination creates something America can't calculate. Imagine a billion voters deciding the future. Imagine a billion buyers shifting the market. Imagine a billion dreamers breaking into the global stage. That's the kind of math that keeps superpowers up at night. Fear doesn't come from what you've already done, it comes from what you might do. India's numbers represent possibility, and possibility is scarier than reality. That's why the world watches India with caution. Because when the power of numbers is finally harnessed, nothing will be able to stop it. And so, America fears India not because of what it is right now, but because of what it's becoming, a nation where numbers are no longer a burden, but the most powerful weapon of all. The rise of knowledge, let me tell you something. Brains are more dangerous than bombs. You can blow up a building, but when you plant an idea, it can shake the whole world. That's what India has been doing quietly. Planting knowledge, growing knowledge, and now the fruit of that knowledge is starting to scare people. America knows one thing. Wars ain't just fought on battlefields anymore. They're fought in labs, in classrooms, in boardrooms. And who's filling those rooms? Indians. Engineers, doctors, coders, scientists. People with the kind of minds that build tomorrow while everybody else is stuck in today. See, the rise of knowledge is not loud. It doesn't march down the street with drums. It whispers in classrooms. It hums in libraries. It types away on keyboards at midnight. But when you wake up, that quiet work has changed everything. That's why America pays attention. You go to the best universities in the world, Harvard, MIT, Stanford, you'll see Indian faces, not just sitting there learning, but topping classes, leading research, breaking new ground. That kind of consistency is impossible to ignore. And when those minds return home or spread across the globe, they carry more than just degrees. They carry influence. They carry innovation. They carry the ability to disrupt industries and rewrite systems. That's where the fear creeps in. Knowledge is power. We all heard that growing up, but in the modern world, knowledge is the only power. You can take land, you can take money, but you can't take intelligence out of somebody's head. That's why India is rising, because you can't strip knowledge from a nation that values education. Think about this. Most of the technology you use daily has fingerprints of Indian minds on it. The phone you're holding, the apps you're scrolling, the software running businesses worldwide, Indians built that. You think America doesn't notice? Of course they do. And let's be real, fear comes from competition. America fears losing its edge. For decades it was the innovator, the trendsetter. But now, there's a nation producing more graduates in 1 year than some countries have citizens. That changes the game. Knowledge spreads faster than anything. You can stop a shipment, you can block a border, but you can't stop an idea once it's out. India is exporting knowledge to every corner of the globe. That's a power you can't sanction or shut down. America fears India because it sees something familiar. It sees hunger, ambition, drive, the same fire that once built America. And when that fire is fueled by education, it burns brighter and longer than any weapon ever could. The world once looked at India as a place of call centers, but now its CEO, its innovators, its pioneers. Some of the biggest companies in the world are being led by Indians. That ain't luck. That's knowledge rising to the top. The rise of knowledge ain't just about individuals either. It's about a culture. A culture that respects learning, that pushes children to reach higher, that refuses to settle for less. That kind of foundation builds generations of leaders. And let me tell you, knowledge creates confidence. When you know who you are and what you can do, you don't bow to nobody. India is starting to stand taller, not because of weapons, but because of wisdom. That's why America fears India, not because of armies marching, but because of minds thinking, not because of threats spoken, but because of ideas unspoken. Ideas that will one day shift power in ways nobody can predict. The rise of knowledge is quiet, but it's unstoppable. And America knows once that wave crashes fully onto the world, there ain't no dam strong enough to hold it back. The economy that won't stop money talks. Let's be real about it. Money is the language every nation understands. And right now, India's economy is starting to speak so loud that the whole world has to stop and listen. That's one of the reasons America fears India. It sees that financial engine starting to roar. For years, people looked at India as a poor country. They saw slums, they saw poverty, and they thought that was the whole story, but they didn't pay attention to the hustle. They didn't notice the seeds being planted. And now, those seeds are starting to bear fruit in the form of unstoppable economic growth. Every major economy has its moment. America had its rise, China had its rise, and now India is stepping into the spotlight. And you can't stop momentum once it gets rolling. That's what has America nervous. You look around the world today. Companies are moving their businesses, factories, and operations to India. Why? Because they see the potential. They see the growth. They see the kind of stability and energy that builds an economic powerhouse. The economy is not just about numbers on a chart. It's about people. And when you've got one of the youngest populations in the world ready to work, ready to build, ready to buy, that's a recipe for unstoppable growth. America knows the truth. Money creates power. When you control money, you influence markets, you influence trade, you influence nations. And India's economy is starting to give it that kind of leverage. Don't think this is just about technology either. India is growing in manufacturing, agriculture, entertainment, trade, real estate, you name it. It's diversifying in a way that makes it impossible to collapse easily. That kind of strength is hard to fight against. Look at the numbers. India is climbing the list of the world's largest economies. And it's not slowing down. Every report, every forecast says the same thing. This economy is on track to become one of the biggest in the world. That makes America pay attention. Money shifts power. If you control the global market, you control negotiations. You walk into the room with a different confidence when your economy is thriving. That's why America fears India, because it knows the stronger India's economy becomes, the less control others have. Think about influence. If India's economy is growing, that means its companies grow too. And when its companies grow, they start competing with American giants. That's not just competition, that's disruption, and nobody likes to be disrupted. The economy also gives India independence. When you've got money, you don't have to bow down to anybody, you don't have to beg, you don't have to borrow, you set your own terms. That independence is what America fears most. Let's not forget, India is a marketplace in itself. With over 1 billion consumers, it doesn't need the world as much as the world needs it. And when you reach that point, you're not chasing approval. You're setting the standard. America fears India because it knows this economy is not a bubble. This ain't a quick rise. It's built on decades of slow, steady growth. And slow, steady growth is the strongest kind because it's not easy to break. An economy that won't stop is like a train with no brakes. It doesn't matter who stands on the track, it's coming through. And America knows if it doesn't move out the way, it's going to get run over by that momentum. That's why India's economic rise isn't just progress, it's power. And that power is what keeps America looking over its shoulder, because it knows the money game is changing, and India is sitting right at the table now. Spiritual strength, let me tell you something money can't buy: spirit. You can build armies, you can build skyscrapers, you can build economies, but you can't build the soul of a people. And that's what India has: soul. That's why America fears it. You see, when a nation is rooted in spirituality, it doesn't move the same way others move. It doesn't collapse just because the world says it should. It doesn't break just because life gets hard. That kind of inner strength makes a country dangerous to anyone who wants to control it. India's power is not just in numbers or money, it's in faith. Faith in God, faith in destiny, faith in resilience. And when people have faith, you can't scare them, you can't manipulate them. They stand taller because they believe in something bigger than themselves. America understands power, but it doesn't always understand spirit. And that's what makes India different. You can fight against a nation's army, but how do you fight against its prayers? How do you fight against people who believe their struggle has purpose? History has shown these empires collapse when they lose their soul. But India's soul has only gotten stronger with every hardship. Colonization didn't take it. Poverty didn't take it. Struggle didn't take it. That spirit only grew tougher. Spiritual strength gives a nation endurance. And endurance beats speed every single time. America might move fast, but India moves steady, and steady lasts longer. That's a fact. You see, spirit doesn't just live in temples or prayers, it lives in the way people live. The way they honor family, the way they honor tradition, the way they keep their values alive. That's the kind of strength that can't be destroyed by outside forces. America fears India because it knows spiritual strength produces resilience. You can knock a man down who relies only on muscles, but try knocking down someone who relies on faith. He's getting back up every single time. Spiritual strength also creates unity. You got a billion people from different walks of life, yet faith binds them. It might be different religions, different practices, but at the core, there's a deep connection to God, to destiny, to something divine. That's not weakness, that's unshakable strength. Let's be real, wealth can fade, power can fade, but faith endures. That's why India has survived centuries of challenges. It wasn't money that carried it, it was spirit. That's what America sees. When a nation has spiritual strength, it doesn't just look at the world through fear, it looks at the world through purpose. That purpose makes people fearless, and fearless people are the hardest people to control. America fears India because it knows spiritual strength makes people impossible to break. You can pressure them, you can test them, you can even try to silence them, but you can't kill what lives inside their hearts. Think about it, spiritual strength doesn't just prepare you for today, it prepares you for tomorrow. It gives you patience, and patience is power. While others panic, India waits, and waiting always brings victory to those who believe. That's why America fears this nation, not just because of its people, not just because of its money, but because of its spirit. A spirit that refuses to die. A spirit that sees every setback as a setup for something greater. And when spirit meets opportunity, the world has no choice but to shift. That's the kind of strength India carries. And that's the kind of strength America can't compete with, because it doesn't come from man, it comes from above. Youth that refuse to quit, let me tell you what really shakes a nation like America. It's not just what a country has today, it's what it's raising for tomorrow. And India's tomorrow is already here. It's young, it's hungry, it's ambitious, and it refuses to quit. Half of India's population is under 30. That means while other countries are getting older, India is getting stronger. You can't underestimate what that means. Energy, innovation, fire, these are weapons you can't measure on a chart. Youth don't wait for permission, they don't wait for opportunity to knock, they build the door. And that's exactly what India's young generation is doing. Starting businesses, writing code, launching startups, changing industries. That's the kind of movement that keeps America awake at night. America fears India because it sees something familiar. It sees the same kind of hunger it once had during its own rise. But here's the difference. India's youth have more tools, more access, and more drive than any generation before them. That's unstoppable. Young people don't carry the same weight of the past. They carry vision. They carry dreams. And when you put millions of young dreamers together in one nation, you don't get noise. You get a revolution. Every new invention, every new industry, every new trend, you better believe India's youth are in the middle of it. They're not just consuming culture, they're creating it. They're not just joining the global economy, they're shaping it. And here's the thing about youth. They don't quit. They fail fast, but they get up faster. You knock one down, 10 more rise. That's not weakness. That's a dangerous kind of resilience America knows it can't match forever. Think about it. An older nation is worried about retirement, but a younger nation, it's dreaming about empires. That's why America fears India. India's youth ain't tired, they're just getting started. Young people bring energy to every space they touch. They bring fresh ideas, they bring new ways of thinking, and they challenge the status quo. That's exactly what India's youth are doing, shaking old systems and building new ones. Don't miss this. Youth means time, and time is the most powerful advantage you can have. America knows its clock is ticking, but India's youth, their clock is just starting, and that time gives them power. A nation filled with young people who refuse to quit is a nation that can't be stopped, because you're not dealing with one generation. You're dealing with wave after wave after wave of ambition. India's youth don't see limits. They don't believe in boundaries. They see the whole world as a stage, and they're ready to step into the spotlight. That's intimidating to any nation that thought it would always be the lead actor. Fear doesn't just come from what's happening now. It comes from what's coming next. And America looks at India's youth and sees what's next. They see a future they can't control, can't predict, and can't compete with. The youth that refuse to quit are the heartbeat of India, and that heartbeat is getting louder every single day. That's not something you can silence. That's not something you can slow down. And when you combine that youth with vision, energy, and drive, you don't just get a generation, you get a force. A force America fears because it knows the future is not in its hands anymore, it's in the hands of India's young warriors. Unity through diversity, one of the greatest strengths people overlook is diversity. Most nations see it as a weakness, something that divides, but India turned it into fuel, and that's why America fears it. Because it's hard to defeat a people who know how to stand together despite their differences. Think about it. Hundreds of languages, dozens of religions, countless traditions, and yet one flag. That ain't easy. That takes strength. That takes discipline. That takes something deeper than politics. It takes unity. America knows division destroys nations. You divide people, you weaken them. But India has learned how to thrive in diversity. That's not chaos. That's resilience. That's strength disguised as variety. You can't put India in a box. It's not one story. It's a billion stories. And when those stories come together, they create something the world can't copy. That's why America keeps its eyes open. Because this unity makes India unpredictable. Diversity creates perspective. Different people bring different ideas, and different ideas spark innovation. That's why India keeps producing solutions the world needs, because it's drawing from a well that never runs dry. And let's be real, unity through diversity ain't about perfection. It's about persistence. India ain't perfect, but it's learning, growing, adjusting. And every time it overcomes differences, it gets stronger. America fears India because it knows that kind of unity is rare. Most nations split apart under that kind of pressure. But India's pressure turned into diamonds, and diamonds shine the brightest when the world tries to crush them. When you've got so many backgrounds, beliefs, and cultures under one roof, you develop patience. You develop understanding. And that patience gives you the ability to outlast anyone who tries to bring you down. Diversity also builds adaptability. You put Indians anywhere in the world, they adjust, they thrive, they rise. That comes from learning to live with differences at home. That skill makes India dangerous to anyone who wants to box it in. Unity through diversity means you can't be broken by outside forces. Because while outsiders are busy trying to point out differences, India has already found ways to turn those differences into strength. America fears that because it's the opposite of what they're used to. They're used to control through division. But India thrives in the very thing that should have broken it apart. That's intimidating. When you've got unity through diversity, you've got creativity, you've got resilience, you've got endurance. That's why India's culture is everywhere, from music to food to films, because diversity produces influence. Influence is powerful, and when your influence reaches every corner of the world, it's not just entertainment, it's soft power. That's how you shape minds without firing a shot, and America knows it. India's unity is messy at times, yes. But messy strength is still strength. It's raw, it's real, it's authentic. And authenticity always lasts longer than polished appearances. That's why America fears India, because it's looking at a nation that should have been broken apart long ago. But instead, it's still standing. Not only standing, but rising, and rising strong because of its diversity, not in spite of it. The global influence is the silent weapon of power. You don't always need armies or weapons when you've already captured people's hearts, minds, and lifestyles. And that's exactly what India has done. That's why America fears it, because India's influence has already crossed borders without firing a single shot. Look around the world today. You'll find India everywhere. In technology, in medicine, in education, in entertainment, in fashion, in food. That's not coincidence. That's influence. That's power spreading quietly but effectively. America knows influence runs deeper than force. You can force somebody to obey, but when they love your culture, your ideas, your products, they follow you willingly. That's the kind of influence India has been building. Bali, wood, yoga, spices, meditation, music. You name it. India has given it to the world. And these aren't just exports, they're experiences. They shape how people live, how they think, how they feel. That's power disguised as culture. Global influence is dangerous to those who want to stay on top. Because it doesn't matter how big your army is, if people's hearts are with someone else, your power is slipping. America sees that with India. You ever notice how Indian talent dominates industries worldwide? CEO, professors, doctors, engineers, they're everywhere. That's not just success, that's influence. It shifts perception. It shows the world what Indians are capable of. Influence is more powerful than intimidation. Intimidation makes people resist. Influence makes people admire, and admiration lasts longer than fear. India has earned admiration in every corner of the globe. America fears India because it knows culture creates legacy. Armies fade, money shifts, but culture endures, and India's culture is so rich, so deep, so timeless. It can't be erased. That's a power no superpower can compete with. Think about food. Indian cuisine is in every city, every nation. That's more than meals. It's connection. It makes people feel closer to a culture without even realizing it. That's the subtle strength of influence. Technology to India provides the brains behind the biggest systems running today's world. You don't always see their faces, but their fingerprints are everywhere. That's silent influence, and silent influence is the scariest kind. Influence also creates loyalty. When people around the world admire India, they stand with India. That gives it allies without signing treaties. And America knows you can't fight against a nation the world loves. Influence moves hearts before it moves policies, and once you capture the heart, the mind follows. That's why America pays attention to every Indian breakthrough, every cultural wave. It knows that's how empires are built in the modern age. Global influence means your reach extends beyond your borders. India doesn't just belong to itself anymore, it belongs to the world. And when a nation belongs to the world, its power becomes universal. America fears India because it sees this influence spreading faster than it can be contained. You can limit armies, you can sanction economies, but you can't stop influence. Once people adopt it, it becomes part of them, and that's India's secret weapon. Global influence. It doesn't conquer with force, it conquers with connection. And that connection is already too deep to be undone. That's what makes America nervous. The unbreakable spirit. You can measure armies, you can measure money, you can measure land, but you can't measure spirit. And that's what makes India so dangerous to anyone who tries to control it, because this nation has an unbreakable spirit. Spirit is what carries people through storms. Spirit is what makes you get up when life keeps knocking you down. And if history has proven anything, it's that India has been knocked down plenty, but it always rises back up stronger. America fears India because it knows you can't defeat people who refuse to stay down. You can conquer their land, you can steal their wealth, you can try to erase their identity, but if their spirit survives, they'll come back, and India always came back. Look at the past. Centuries of invasions, colonization, poverty, struggle. Any other nation would have collapsed under that kind of weight, but not India, because when you carry an unbreakable spirit, no chain can hold you forever. Spirit makes people resilient, and resilience is scarier than strength. Because strength can fade, but resilience keeps coming back, wave after wave, generation after generation. That's why America pays attention. It's not just looking at what India has today, it's looking at the fire in its people's hearts. That fire can't be put out, and an unquenchable fire will one day light up the whole world. Spirit shows up in struggle, and India has struggled like no other, but instead of breaking, it hardened. Instead of shattering, it sharpened. That's what creates an unbreakable people. You can't buy spirit. You can't trade for it. You can't fake it. Either you've been through enough pain to build it, or you haven't, and India has been through enough to make its spirit indestructible. America fears India because it knows unbreakable spirit creates unstoppable progress. Even if India stumbles, even if it lags behind for a season, that spirit will push it forward again and again and again. When you've got spirit, you don't need the world's approval. You don't need permission to rise. You rise because it's in your nature. That's exactly what India has been doing, rising, quietly, steadily, unshaken. Spirit is contagious too. It inspires others. That's why Indian communities around the world thrive. They carry that spirit wherever they go, and it lifts them above whatever challenge they face. America fears that because you can't contain spirit within borders. You can stop armies at gates, but you can't stop spirit from spreading across oceans, and India's spirit has already spread everywhere. Spirit also gives people vision. It makes them believe the impossible is possible. That's why India keeps achieving what outsiders thought it never could. Because its people believe, and belief is the first step to victory. The unbreakable spirit is India's greatest weapon. It's silent, it's invisible, but it's there in every prayer, every struggle, every success story. And that's the one thing no superpower can steal. That's why America fears India, not just for its numbers, not just for its money, not just for its culture, but for its unbreakable spirit. A spirit that refuses to quit, refuses to bow, refuses to break. And when that spirit rises fully, the whole world will have no choice but to recognize it. Family, we've walked through it all. The numbers, the knowledge, the economy, the spirit, the unity, the youth, the culture, the influence. And when you put all of that together, you see why America fears India, because fear don't always mean hate. Sometimes fear means respect. Sometimes fear means realization. And sometimes fear means somebody just woke up to the fact that they're not the only giant in the room anymore. See, India's story is not about weakness. It's about resilience. It's not about poverty. It's about potential. It's not about what it used to be. It's about what it's becoming. And when you rise from centuries of struggle with your faith intact, your culture alive, your people stronger than ever, you don't just survive, you dominate. America fears India because it knows one truth. A nation built on unbreakable spirit cannot be stopped. You can slow it down, but you can't silence it. You can try to contain it, but you can't cage it. You can try to ignore it, but eventually you'll have to acknowledge it, because when destiny calls, no power on earth can hold it back. India is not just stepping into its future, it's running toward it. And the world knows once this nation hits its stride, the balance of power will shift forever. That's not arrogance, that's reality. And reality is always stronger than fear. So let the world keep watching. Let America keep fearing. Let nations keep whispering, because what's coming can't be stopped. What's rising can't be held down. And what's destined cannot be denied. India's time is not tomorrow. It's not someday. It's now. And when a nation with this much power, this much faith, this much unity, and this much fire finally steps into the fullness of its strength, no force on earth can stand in the way. That's why America fears India, and that's why the world will soon respect India, because you can't fear something forever. You eventually have to honor it, and that's exactly what's coming.